Charles Arthur Floyd was born into a world that did not offer much mercy. Poverty was not a temporary condition in his childhood, it was the atmosphere he breathed. By the time he was a teenager in Oklahoma, the boy who would later be known as Pretty Boy Floyd had already begun drifting toward trouble. Local reports from his early years described him as a restless farm youth with a taste for easy money. His first arrests were for petty theft and small robberies. Nothing yet suggested legend. Nothing yet suggested infamy, but at 18, Floyd was convicted of robbery and sent to prison. A local paper wrote at the time, "Young Floyd shows no sign of reform, and authorities believe he may prove a habitual offender." It was a line that would follow him for the rest of his life. Prison changed him. Fellow inmates later described him as quiet and observant. He studied people. He studied guards. He studied how men got caught. When he was released, the country he returned to was sliding toward catastrophe. The Great Depression hollowed out the American heartland. Banks foreclosed on farms. Families lost homes they had worked generations to build. Newspapers were filled daily with auction notices and despair. In that climate, when Charles Floyd began robbing banks again, the reaction was complicated. Headlines soon screamed his nickname, a name he despised. One Oklahoma paper splashed across its front page, "Pretty Boy Floyd strikes again, bank looted. Robber escapes." Another described him as polite but determined, a bandit who smiles as he issues commands. Floyd himself reportedly bristled at the moniker. He once said, "I ain't no pretty boy. That's just newspaper talk." To friends, he insisted he was simply doing what he had to do. According to those who knew him, he often remarked, "A man's got to eat. So does his family." As his robberies multiplied across Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and Ohio, stories began to grow around him. Farmers claimed Floyd tore up mortgage papers during bank holdups. One farmer was quoted as saying, "If he burned those notes, he did more good in 5 minutes than the bank ever did." Whether every story was true hardly mattered. The legend was taking shape, but the federal government saw something far less romantic. Under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, the Federal Bureau of Investigation labeled Floyd a dangerous fugitive. Hoover publicly called him a notorious desperado and enemy of society. Federal bulletins described him as armed, cunning, and utterly without regard for human life. The most damaging accusation came after the Kansas City Massacre in 1933, a violent shootout that left lawmen dead. Authorities quickly connected Floyd's name to the crime. Newspapers declared, Floyd linked to bloody Kansas City outrage. The public was told he had crossed from robber to killer. Floyd denied it. According to later accounts, he said, "They needed a name the public knew. Mine was handy." Even some observers at the time questioned the evidence, but in the court of public opinion, suspicion was enough. By 1934, the net was tightening. Safe houses were raided. Associates were arrested. The press described him as cornered but defiant. A Missouri paper wrote, "Floyd remains elusive, slipping through the fingers of law enforcement like smoke." Still, among many ordinary citizens, sympathy lingered. One Oklahoma resident was quoted saying, "He never robbed a poor man. Only banks." In an era when banks symbolized ruin for thousands of families, that distinction mattered. As the manhunt intensified, Floyd reportedly acknowledged his fate. A friend later claimed Floyd said quietly, "I know how this ends. They always get their man." On October 22, 1934, near East Liverpool, Ohio, that prediction came true. After being tracked and confronted, Floyd was shot during a pursuit. Conflicting accounts followed immediately. Federal agents claimed he confessed before dying. Other witnesses insisted he said. One local account quoted him simply, "I'm through." A newspaper the next day printed the headline, "Pretty Boy Floyd Slain, Public Enemy Falls in Ohio." The article described him as one of the most hunted men in America. He was 30 years old. When his body was returned to Oklahoma, more than 20,000 people attended his funeral. A reporter observed, the crowd gathered not in celebration of crime, but in fascination with a legend. Some wept openly. Others stood in silence. Whatever he had been in life, criminal, outlaw, symbol, he had become something larger in death. Pretty Boy Floyd robbed banks. He carried weapons. He lived outside the law. Yet he also lived inside a moment in American history when faith in institutions had collapsed and anger burned hot. To law enforcement, he was a menace. To many struggling citizens, he was a rebel against a system they believed had failed them. In the end, Floyd left behind more questions than answers. Was he a ruthless outlaw? A scapegoat? A folk hero shaped by desperation? The newspapers gave him a nickname. The government gave him a label. The people gave him a legend, and somewhere between those versions lies the truth of Charles Arthur Floyd, the man the world remembers as Pretty Boy Floyd. And that's where we'll leave it for now. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that little bell notification so you'll be the first to know when the next story drops. Trust me. You won't want to miss what's coming next. We'll find out together. Until then, stay curious. And I'll see you in the next one.